that says this is how every one of those questions would get answered. Now, that's what a coherent economic model is. There's nothing that guarantees that a particular coherent economic model way of answering questions is a good idea or a desirable way to answer it. Capitalism answers all those questions. Command planning answers all those questions. But that's what the model is, and so we said, let's see if we can design a model that answers all of these questions. That's clearly not a market system, and clearly not a system that anyone would ever call sort of command or authoritarian planning. Let's just see if that's possible. And the truth of the matter is, I don't think anybody had ever done that before. And I think if we made a contribution, that was in fact one of the contributions. So we did that, and we published the answer in 2 books in 1991. One book was written for non-economists and sort of activists who were interested in alternatives to capitalism. The other book was published by Princeton University Press, and it was written specifically for economists who perhaps had no interest in an alternative to capitalism at all, but there it is for you. You don't have to like it, but you can at least have it so that you can look and see, well, is there a mistake here? Have they essentially thought they had answered everything in a way that's coherent, but in fact it's not? So that's what the model of a participatory economy is. That's its origins. That's where it came from. It was basically an explicit answer to what I call the Tina defense. Because what Nove was telling us was, stop dreaming that there's anything different from a market system or a system of command planning. Stop looking. And I think what we demonstrated, and it's been out there for 20 years, and professional economists know about it. It's been also written up in journals. Most professional economists don't like the system. Most professional economists love capitalism. Unfortunately, these days, most professional economists love neoliberal capitalism. But at least it's sort of been vetted by professional economists, and there's no denying that this is a coherent system. It is a real possibility. And the other thing that I'll mention, but I don't think it's the part that should be important for most sort of citizens or activists. The other thing I'll mention is that one of the claims we made was, not only is it possible, we can demonstrate something that is a concern to economists, and that is, if you ran an economy in this way, would it use the productive resources that are available to us in an efficient way? In an efficient way, the way economists define efficiency. Would the outcome of the planning procedure actually be what economists call a Pareto optimum? That's what economists call an efficient outcome. And we said, well, we've got a coherent model. We can look and see under what assumptions would this planning procedure and would this economy arrive at an efficient use of resources. And lo and behold, we proved that it would, under less stringent assumptions than professional economists like me have to make to say, well, under what conditions would a market economy achieve an efficient outcome? Under less stringent and more realistic assumptions, the planning procedure is more efficient than what you would get in a market process. So anyway, that's what it is. What are its major features? I mean, what are the major components, and what makes it different from other sort of alternative visions? Well, it has some very specific goals. We basically started by saying, what do we want the economy to achieve? Saying, well, we want it to achieve economic democracy. We want it to deliver real, meaningful economic democracy. And we want to be careful how we conceptualize that. What do we mean by economic democracy? Because that's a word that's used in a lot of different ways to mean a lot of different things by a lot of different people. So let's be very, very specific. We want to design a system to the extent that's possible that will give people decision-making power or influence over economic decisions to the degree that they are affected. This is important. There are some economic decisions that only affect 1 or 2 people. There are some economic decisions that affect more or less all of us more or less equally. But the truth is, most economic decisions affect some people more than others. They affect more than one or two people, but they affect some people more than others. And in some sense, that's the rub. How do you figure out a way that you can allocate decision-making power over things so that people, if a decision is going to affect me more than you, I'm going to have more say than you do. If it affects you, you're going to have some say, but not as much as me if it affects me more. So we said that's the goal there in terms of, that's what we mean by participatory economic decision-making. Decision-making that actually delivers something along those lines. Yeah?
How would that operate in a system where you have a game theory situation where each person optimizes for himself, but the outcome of the whole will be less beneficial?
Let me get to that. Let me get to sort of how this works. Second thing we said is we'd like the economy, we'd like the system to reward people fairly. We'd like economic justice. One thing I'll just say very briefly is I don't think any model of market socialism can actually deliver economic justice. When you have labor markets, if you have labor markets and capital markets, unrestricted labor markets and capital markets are what will deliver and generate the kind of tremendous growth of income inequality that we've been experiencing over the past 30 years that Occupy finally stood up and said, oh my God, for 30 years the top 1% has appropriated practically the entire efficiency gains in the global economy, and the 99% below them have gotten pretty much nothing. So unrestricted capital and labor markets can predictably generate a tremendous amount of income inequality. That's exactly what history has just proved. Social democracy, to some extent, doesn't let that happen. It puts some restrictions. It puts some restrictions on that basically sort of diminishes the degree to which the inequality is sort of excessive and unfair. We said, but diminishing economic injustice is certainly not the same as actually delivering on the promise of economic justice. So we said we want economic justice, and we'll tell you what we mean by that. We mean that if people are going to get different incomes or consumption rights, well, on what grounds would that be fair? Well, if somebody actually works harder or makes more sacrifices than somebody else, well, then those are grounds for why somebody might actually deserve more income. But otherwise, there really are no reasons for why somebody should deserve more income than another person. If somebody puts in more effort, if somebody sort of engages in more personal sacrifices and sort of doing what it is they do than other people do, then yes, it's fair. Then income inequality is unfair to that degree if it's commensurate with unequal sacrifices. We said we'd like an economy that does that. Well, I can tell you right now, you're not going to get that result if you have labor markets. And you can take a look at any of the models out there of market socialism, and they have a labor market, and the laws of supply and demand will not deliver on economic justice if that's what you mean by economic justice. Then we said, look, we also clearly need to design an economy that is environmentally sustainable. We can't have an economy that is just programmed to destroy the environment and driven to destroy the environment in ways that we have to somehow sort of fight up. We have to protect the environment from an economy that's literally attacking the environment all the time. We need to that's another goal we have to have. And we said we want to do this. We'd like to design an economy that's efficient. This is when the activists all leave run for the exits. Efficient doesn't mean profitable. They're not the same thing. That's a misuse of the word. For activists and reasonable people, the word efficient also gets a bad rep, understandably, because most mainstream economists basically only worry about efficiency. They pretend as if there is no other goal that they should be concerned about other than efficiency. Whether or not something is going to have a detrimental effect on economic justice, that's